Sunday soul. In Columbia, Sunday soul. Sunday soul. In Columbia, Sunday soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are so elated to have the esteemed Mr. James Manning on with us today, who is the former chair of the Richland School Board for District 2.
Correct. Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming on to Table Talk today.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you taking time to come and sit down with us, because boy, I tell you, this is a hot topic these days, right?
It is.
It
Absolutely.
really is.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like for you serving as the board's chair for the Board of Trustees? What was that experience like?
Well, I'll tell you, so I had 12 years of experience on the Richland District 2 School Board, and I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. It was fantastic. I don't think there's any bigger mission than public education, the great equalizer when it comes to our country. And one of the things that sets America apart from many other countries is a free education for all. So I love my opportunity to serve there. Over the 12 years, it was very different. When I got on the board, we were very focused internally on the mission of the district, the needs of our students, the work at hand that needed to be done. And it was not a contentious environment. Not to say that we didn't have potentially, issues that maybe would arise here and there, differences and that sort of thing. But it wasn't contentious. Over the 12 years, and particularly the last two since COVID, public education has become a very political, divisive, and contentious environment. And it got to be very difficult. It was very difficult.
What were some of the things that made it difficult in such a highly politicized environment?
People were, and I understand, but they were very passionate. When we got into COVID, students going home, I mean, let's be honest, it's not even just an education, right? We're seeing that people are not the same since COVID. I think people are less cordial to each other. I think tempers flare more frequently. The degree to which tempers flare, I think, are higher than what we've seen before. People have a lot less patience.
We found out the worst parts of us.
The worst parts of us, yeah, absolutely. When it comes to your children in school, there's nothing more personal and passionate than our children.
Right.
And we saw that on the board. People were angry that their students had to wear masks. They were angry that their students couldn't be in school with other students.
What was your understanding of that, about the mask? I mean, we know that history repeats itself.
Right.
So we know in American history, for those of you that know anything about the Spanish flu, we saw this before.
Yeah.
But in our time, what was your understanding of parents' issues around the mask mandate, and did the district have a mask mandate?
We did. We had a mask mandate in place. Richland 2 felt that was an administrative issue, and the board, while we had policies that covered it, did not make the mandate directly. We allowed Dr. Davis and administration to make those decisions. We felt they were closer to the issue, had more time and resources to understand the CDC rules and how those were implemented, and we were there to certainly question administration and understand what was going on, support administration. But at the end of the day, we did what we felt was best based off the information that we had from the CDC, the guidance we had, and it was to try to protect everyone. Whether you believe masks worked or whether you believe they didn't, the guidance that we had was it was the best way to prevent the spread of the COVID symptoms, the COVID disease amongst folks. Just like you expect your doctor to wear a mask in surgery. If we believe it works for him, then we have to believe that there's some benefits when it comes to protecting our staff, our students, and folks that came home to vulnerable adults and other folks that are vulnerable. And so we just did what we thought was best.
With roughly about almost 25 or 30,000 students.
Yeah, close to 30, yeah.
It's the fifth largest school district in the state.
That's right, fifth largest in the state, largest non-county wide district in the state of South Carolina.
Do you feel like COVID really exasperated a lot of the tensions between board members? Do you think it boiled up from the bottom to the top, or do you feel like it came from the top and trickled down to the bottom?
I think it came from the top and trickled down. There was already tension on the board. You have 7 people that ran for office, were elected, felt like they were trying to carry out the mission of whatever constituency that they listened to. And I want to touch on that because we have to be careful in this world of social media to understand who our audience is and what we're trying to achieve. It's very easy for us to get in a bubble and only listen to what we think is a larger audience, but sometimes is not. The audience gets filtered out to the ones maybe we go to church with, and often, where we grocery shop or where we spend our time. But if you think about it, you choose to go to the religious facility where people are often more like you, right? We have choice. We can choose to go to one that may be more conservative or less conservative, or
we end up in silos.
We end up in silos, and I think politicians have to be careful that we not just listen to the people that have the easiest access to us, that we understand that our constituency is bigger than that.
Or money,
yeah. And I think that sometimes, I think that combination of that along with COVID, political tension, personalities, it can easily boil over, and we're still seeing that, I think, to some degree.
Well, I mean, certainly these days the news is really tough, especially in light of the South Carolina Inspector General's report that came out. Have you had the opportunity to see the final report by the Inspector General's office?
I have. Yeah.
What were your thoughts on, some of the 54 pages that had you named, as part of this investigation? What were your thoughts about the Inspector General's report?
I think, first off, I think it's a shame that Richland Two, who's always been a premier district in this community, that we were the first one that the governor had to highlight and bring attention to. I think when I talk to people, it's incredible to them. They never would think that Richland Two would be in the situation that we were the first one to be under that spotlight. However,
why do you think that was?
Well, I think that the personalities on the board, boiled over. I mean, we clearly saw it. I'm sure we'll address it as we go through here, but if you listen to look at this situation where we had a board member that was arrested for threatening the safety of another board member while we're in the middle of board activity.
And some of that actually played out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was more than one board member.
We've had more than one board member who's been arrested for, tempers flaring and carrying that past, normal professional boundaries. We had one that had a potential physical altercation, one that had a verbal altercation, both which led to arrests. Yes.
Wow. That's pretty tough. So what I'm hearing is that essentially the abundance of unprofessional conduct on the board is really what triggered this over into sort of a blow up in the eye of the public.
Yeah.
And even the report states that the Inspector General the governor had received a number of complaints from parents, administrative staff, and we're talking about some 4,000 employees,
close
maybe
to 4,000 employees,
2,000 teachers.
That's right. Yes.
So I mean, to get do you think it was an abundance of complaints that the governor's office had seen, or it was just the right complaints mixed with what had played out?
So let's talk about that. I think that I believe I have never seen evidence of hundreds of emails that was claimed by the governor's office. What I believe occurred was the right people that complained to the governor and had access. And I want to paint a picture, because I think that public education, I know public education is under attack right now. And there are people that say, James, it's not. It absolutely is under attack. There are very organized groups. Moms for Liberty, there's been plenty of articles in the state about how they succeeded and turning over numerous board positions.
We've seen that play out. Lexington 3.
Lexington 1, we've
Yeah.
seen Lexington 1,
Berkeley
we've seen
County.
Charleston, Berkeley County,
Yeah.
Lexington, Richland 5.
Yeah.
And
And even the Freedom Caucus
the Freedom Caucus is
frivolously
kind of,
suing.
frivolously suing school
Mhm.
districts.
Mhm.
We were talking about what books are in libraries
Mhm.
and those sorts of things. They are creating chaos, and they are pitting board members against each other to create that tension
Mhm.
and to purposefully create that chaos and tension for control, so that they can then say, that school board or that district is a mess. We need to change the folks that are on the board. And they are willing to go to any means to do that. There are no professional boundaries. We've had board members, we've had people follow us home, we've had people blog about, if you see us out in public, take pictures and send pictures of where we are and what we're doing.
Have you personally experienced anyone
Absolutely,
following you around?
Yeah, I have.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It's scary. They're talking about going to my home, taking pictures where at the time my 16-year-old daughter, now 17-year-old daughter lives, taking pictures outside. That's not okay, and it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
But again, they have no boundaries. We've had other board members that experienced similar issues, taking pictures. We had one board member accused that she was parking in a handicap spot while she was out parking. It wasn't even her car. But they don't even ask. They just put it out there like that was what happened. And then you're on the defensive trying to defend something that you never did in the first place.
Wow.
And so that these groups are creating chaos and tension in order to gain control of school districts.
Because this is about power.
This is about power.
I mean, even in the midst of this opening conversation, we haven't even got to the children yet.
We're not talking about children in any of this. Is all adult issues.
This
power.
is adult issues spilling over into
Yes.
what's supposed to be a conversation about children. Many of us understand, those of us maybe that follow the news a little bit, understand how highly politicized this is.
Right.
When you look at what the midterm elections or the general election turned out this time,
Right.
the whole debacle between Lisa Ellis and Ellen Weaver.
That's right.
But I think the thing that stands out for me today is Florida Governor Ron DeSantis blocking, programs that specifically are about African American studies and this contentious argument about CRT,
Right.
when we know CRT is not actually taught in school.
That's correct. Absolutely. I
Yeah,
think
but-
that folks are trying to paint a picture that they're falling victim to some sort of CRT, or the words they use are indoctrination of our students,
Mhm.
right? This idea that schools are indoctrinating students to dislike white folks, or to dislike certain groups in our society, or that we are indoctrinating them when it comes to sexual orientation or preference. That's
LGBTQ
LGBTQ
agenda.
agendas from, and that the schools are promoting those agendas is what they're trying to advertise. And I've made this statement publicly many times, and we'll reiterate it here. These folks are worried about particular books in our library, right? They are
The book banning, we've seen the book bans.
the book bans,
Yeah.
and we've seen this in history before. This is a kind of pulling that back out of the hat again, so to speak. I just find it so interesting that is such a political issue, when if you listen to the radio, you watch what's on TV, you watch what's on social media, you watch the many hours that our students are online, and all that they have access to on the internet, in many cases unfettered, with no parental supervision or very little.
And very curious.
Right, very curious, yeah, and it's all out there, right? I mean, whether it's even intentional or not, it's easy just to start one place and end up in
Right.
an unattended
Right.
place, that somehow we think our schools are the place that are indoctrinating children. I think it's mistaken, and it's done on purpose to twist. Public education is for all students, regardless of your background, regardless of your color, your religion, your sexual orientation. That has always been the purpose of public education, to educate all. But we are in a fight for public education that we haven't seen since we fought for rights for African Americans, desegregation of our schools. We are now seeing that level building back up.
Sort of like a racial reckoning.
Racial reckoning, sexual reckoning of our students. Now we've added that extra element, right, of sexual preference and orientation to the table now.
Which some would say was actually in this modern era spearheaded by Anita Hill.
Right.
And her fight against Clarence Thomas.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you experienced, I mean, because this is a board made up of predominantly African American women. Do you feel like you've ever experienced discrimination yourself, or do you feel like you've ever run into that sort of that expectation to dance around some of these topics?
Well, obviously, it's I think it's tough when when I started on the board. I mean, we had a mix of at the time I believe there were 4 white folks and 3 African American. We had a decent mix of men and women, and over time we've transitioned. And I look, there are certain groups in the district, easy to go look up. They put report cards out for candidates, and it gave me an F- and talked about the fact that I was a racist and that I do racist things. I've had board members call me racist.
You had board of trustee members who called you racist.
Yes, regularly.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because when we're trying to create chaos in the system, we do things that we know we want to potentially undermine the credibility of certain people, right? We want to undermine their credibility. We want to undermine their ability to influence, their ability to lead. When you look at the fact that as a male and as a white male, that numerous times on a board where I was minority both in gender and race, and I was elected to the chair a number of times by my colleagues on the board, I think it makes some people uncomfortable. I think it makes them unhappy. I think that it's a way to undermine your ability to lead, or an attempt to undermine your ability to lead. And listen, my record when I got on the board, we dealt with many issues. I was the chair of the board during the Spring Valley officer situation where the white officer pulled the young black girl out of her seat. And I led the district as the chair through that time. And since then, we've instituted a diversity and equity and inclusion officer with a real focus on minority issues, which includes not just African Americans, but also the LGBTQ plus community and the other issues that we have to address. I was, when we hired Baron Davis, he was our first African American principal at Spring Valley High School. I was the only white vote that voted for him to come into the district as principal. When we hired Baron as superintendent, I was the chair that was able to sign that first contract of an African American superintendent in our district.
What kind of relationship did you maintain with Baron even after he was appointed as the superintendent? Were you all ever close, or?
Well, I mean, you're always, you have a close relationship with any superintendent, especially when you're the chair. You frequently talk, discuss, create agendas. If you have to have conversation about a lot of things, both comfortable and uncomfortable, right? I mean, leading a district the size of our district and the complex issues in front of us, you have to have real open, honest conversations. And so you do get to be, and I don't want to say an inappropriate, close is friends, but you get to be close work colleagues. Absolutely. There's no, you don't have a choice. It just happens through the process of doing that. I always appreciated the fact that Baron was a strong leader, that he always stood for what he thought was right, that he would push against unpopular agendas regardless of what it was. And I mean, he led us through the pandemic, which is one of the toughest times to be a leader in public education, and he stood with a strong back, resolute in what he thought was right, and carried the weight of that, I thought, very well.
Do you think that is ultimately what brought us to, for those of you watching that don't know, just 48 hours ago,
right?
Dr. Baron Davis submitted his resignation to the board. there have been speculation that this was ultimately forced.
Right.
But do you think that that strong, resolute approach is what brought us to this point? Where we see what some would say an amazing superintendent.
Right.
Do you think that, and based on the IG report, that Mrs. McFadden, may have had some strong opinions about Dr. Davis and maybe his stance to not lean into some of the things that perhaps some board members wanted. Do you think that was part of the issue?
I think it's a merging of a couple different things.
Okay.
One, I think that we had board members that had personal differences with Dr. Davis that were, I would say at this point, irreconcilable. Sorry, I can't say that word. Sorry, I apologize.
I got
yes,
yeah.
Differences that they were just never going to get beyond. It had become personal on their behalf in a way that was probably difficult to get past.
Was it personal?
In some cases, I absolutely believe it was personal with them. Yeah, absolutely. I believe it was. I believe, there's examples in that report where he's had to tell board members no, that they couldn't, travel, do certain, go to certain conferences, that it was inappropriate, or that they couldn't stay an extra day at a conference that was at the beach without the right documentation, upholding board policy, and or that they couldn't get advances on travel that they thought that they needed, that he did, that he refused. And I mean, there's evidence. If anybody were to, FOIA emails, they could see that in writing. I mean, they accused him of financial wrongdoing.
Or you could pull the IG report.
Pull the IG report and see some of that in the IG report.
Yeah, for instance, April 28, 2022, email to Superintendent Davis, members of his staff, and all board members. Mrs. McFadden admonished Superintendent Davis to produce information on board member travel and placed on him the responsibility of approving the overspending of board member accounts. Mrs. McFadden stated, "This will definitely be a cause for insubordination and direct effect on your evaluation. Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm going on record questioning your integrity." Now,
Yes.
Superintendent Davis was charged with overseeing a $300 million budget of taxpayer dollars to deliver public education to school-aged children. As the only direct report of the board, Superintendent Davis is in the the position of ensuring the expenditure of taxpayer dollars for board travel in support of public education. So was this merely that Superintendent Davis was upholding his part as superintendent?
Absolutely. He has to uphold policy, state law. He's got to uphold what's in the best interest of the district as a whole, because we hold him accountable for the fiscal for the fiscal components of the district. And so if we as board members are asking to do things that go against the board policies that we voted and put in place, or that go against state procurement or state law, or what's in the best interest of the district, he has a responsibility to uphold that.
And the word no.
The word no is part of that responsibility.
Yeah.
So there's a combination of that, and a combination of board members who were supported by the Moms for Liberty group, that very conservative group that's out there. And I think that what we saw was we have a couple of the new board members that came on with that support and what they've been hearing from the parents that are part of that group. Some cases, these parents that we're talking about don't have kids in the school district. They don't live in the school district. It's their mission is the undermining of public education, regardless of the boundaries of the school district or their kids being in our district.
So you feel like Richland Two? Do you feel like Richland Two has been infiltrated already by some of these groups like Moms for Liberty, or maybe alt-right conservative groups?
Don't feel, I know.
You know?
I know.
Okay, so even board members that are there presently, that are currently serving on the Board of Trustees, do you feel like they are also backed by these conservative groups?
I know that they were heavily supported by these groups. And, when I want to be careful using the word supported, because some people will say, well, James, what's your proof that they're supported? But I know that folks who openly state that they're part of the Moms for Liberty group were very, they had 4 candidates that they stood behind strongly, and 2 of those candidates came on board for us this year, or were elected to the board. So I absolutely know that they have some backing. I don't know what level that is, but I know that they fully supported their campaigns.
And Dr.
publicly.
Davis is a very well decorated educator.
Absolutely.
With a huge amount of responsibility.
That's right.
Do you?
And I want to back up too. You mentioned our budget of $320 million. That's just the general fund. The Richland Two budget, and again we talked about power, but also money. The Richland Two budget, with the bond referendum, other funds, is actually probably closer to a total of $1 billion.
$1 billion, and Richland County's overall budget is just over $1 billion.
That's right. Yeah.
Richland County itself is a $1.5 billion economy.
That's right. There's big money in this too, not just there's power and the access to the money.
Because this is an autonomous board.
That's right.
It's an autonomous board. So do you think that this resignation of Dr. Davis is really a segue to the larger plan of conservative alt-right groups like Moms for Liberty to make the types of changes to board policy that impact students or teachers to stop teaching?
Unequivocally.
Yeah.
100%. I've been saying, I said this before the election, and I saw the game plan already. Look at Lexington, Richland 5, and I don't want to speak, I'm not going to speak badly about any superintendents that are in these positions. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing out there. Lexington, Richland 5, Berkeley, Charleston County, those are examples that we have right here in our own backyard where boards changed. One of the first orders of business was to fire decorated superintendents.
Right.
Christine Meltz, Lexington Richland 5 Superintendent of the Year. And that change in the board, they let her go, right? We can say mutual agreement, all the things. I mean, I've been part of hiring and firing superintendents multiple times during my time on the board. And I understand what the language is you have to put in these contracts, right? You come to some mutual agreement.
A dance of sorts.
A dance of sorts. But essentially it's a letting go of the superintendent. This is a strong superintendent, and you hire a first-time superintendent. In many cases, I would say in most cases, I've seen them hire an African-American superintendent who's a first-time superintendent. So I think, this is my opinion, I don't have any physical evidence of it, but in my opinion, it helps cover down on their issues that they have over race and gives them a shield against that agenda. And they hire somebody who doesn't have experience as a superintendent that is less likely to use that no word we talked about before when it comes to board members and individual board. And
so it becomes a puppet of sorts?
That is my opinion, yes.
Okay. I mean, because if you're not very experienced, you're going to have to be led to navigate such a large sort of ecosystem.
And let's talk about that, because in fact, I just talked with another school board member who's a current school board member in another district, and we talked about what does it mean when we talk about a weak superintendent or a strong superintendent, right? I think, so let's talk about what my thoughts are on that, and I think there's plenty that would agree with me. So you have a board in Richland 2 that's made up of 7 board members. Your strength as a board is in whatever the majority of that board wants, and that's through public votes. You vote on policy, you vote on direction of the district, you agree on what you want the outcomes of the district to be, that you then charge the superintendent with performing or achieving those outcomes.
As like
those
a CEO.
Goals. As a CEO, what it does not mean is that as an individual board member that I can go to the superintendent and tell that individual to either hire somebody that I know that I think should be hired for a position, to tell that superintendent to perform certain things, to tell that superintendent that, I want to stay an extra day at a conference past when the conference happened, and you're going to cover that cost regardless of what the rules say. Because you as an individual don't have any authority on that board. It's the 7 or the majority of you that is where the influence and power comes. Well, a strong superintendent will stand up, as Dr. Davis did, to the desires of the individuals and say, I appreciate where you're coming from, but I understand you want me to, change the direction of some department, but I'm not going to do that. I believe that department and what they're doing is working well, and you can go out in the public and vote on it or change the policy if you think that the policy is not right. But I'm not going to allow you as an individual to direct the direction of the district.
Has that historically been a norm for, I would say, seasoned board members? Is that sort of what they have consistently tried to do? Do you feel like they continue to try to put pressure individually on the superintendent to do their own, perform their own agenda?
I believe, intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, that they do. I mean, if anybody's ever served on a board, there's always this ebb and flow, right, of where the epicenter of power lies between those competing forces, and that's how it's designed to work. There should always be a little bit of a tug and pull, right? It should never be absolute power of the board or absolute power of the superintendent.
Checks and balances.
It's a check and balances system.
It's freedom.
It's freedom, right? Yeah. And so you sometimes have, unintentionally, you may say, I really think we should do X, but then the superintendent has to say, well, are you telling me to do that, or are you asking me to do that, right? Sometimes we have to watch our own language as elected officials and how we work with the one employee that we, when I was in that role that we had. And other times, there are people who absolutely just say, you will do X, right? Whatever that is, or you will approve whatever it is that I want.
That's a very bold move there.
That's a bold move, but it happens. Yeah.
Does it happen without the knowledge of the larger board?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Sometimes it might happen in certain groups of the board. It could just be an individual. I mean, it happens at all different levels within that, with knowledge or no knowledge, yes.
All right, let's take a quick break here. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back with Mr. James Manning. South Carolina, it's Fat Tuesday Mardi Gras, presented by the Bistro by Fleur Delicious. Tuesday, February the 21st, 2023, from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. at Columbia's hottest new restaurant and entertainment supercenter. One price, two events, one huge celebration featuring 2 live stages, amazing performances, an indoor-outdoor event with authentic New Orleans cuisine from executive chef Greg Barthé. 2700 Broad River Road, Columbia, South Carolina, 29210. Book your tickets today at fattuesdaysc.eventbrite.com. That's PHAT Tuesday SC.eventbrite.com. And always call the party line for more details. 803-939-6544. Security strictly enforced. Fat Tuesday Mardi Gras. We'll see you there. And dress like you're going somewhere, baby. C'est bon.
No doubt, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Mr. James Manning, former chair of Richland Two School Board, and boy, I tell you, this has been an interesting, bevy of discussion here as it pertains to, just even what the Inspector General's report calls dysfunction. Mm-hmm. It says the report called the board for which you were a part of, even during this investigation, dysfunctional. And earlier you had spoken about the right people. Mm-hmm. The right people helped to sort of trigger this investigative report. Mm-hmm. During the time that the Inspector General was investigating the school board, had they been in touch with you personally to do interviews or to talk about what the dysfunction was in your opinion? What do you think the dysfunction is, and have they approached you about that?
Well, so let's talk all the way back to how we found out about the investigation. When we talk about the quote unquote right individuals that have access to the governor's office and to conservative groups within the state, the way that the district, that we as a board in the district found out that the governor had formally requested the state inspector general to come in and investigate was through a letter that had been written to the inspector general from the governor's office that was put on Facebook before we ever had the letter delivered to us.
Facebook.
That is how we formally found out that there had been a formal letter written to the Inspector General requesting an investigation of us through a Facebook post.
Was the investigation into the members of the Board of Trustees or the district as a whole?
So it's interesting. This new law that the legislature wrote gives the governor the power, and the Inspector General is his investigative arm or function over school boards. Absolute. I mean, the letter was written in such a way that the Inspector General had unfettered access to anything and everything that he wanted access to, regardless of whether it was board business, board relations, district business. There were absolutely no parameters around it.
Does that include personal information from such as children or parents or any?
Well, no. I mean, there's protections in place that the Inspector General might have access, might see certain information about students or other things if it was related to things, but then he redacts that information. That we were able to redact some legal issues with our legal counsel, right? Because there's laws that protect that. Certain PII or PHI, certainly if we needed to protect that information, we would protect it.
For those of you that know that's personally identifiable information.
Or personal health information.
Or personal health
right?
information,
yes,
right, okay.
So we were able to protect some of that, but outside of, and maybe look at, discipline records around a specific student, but when it came to sort of district-wide functions, operations, that sort of thing, he had unfettered access to that.
Okay, and so I'm trying to frame this properly because, we've actually heard from one or two other members. We did reach out to a number of people, and for obvious reasons, we understand why we perhaps have not received a response. But from one of the members, and we'll just say who is one of the most popular, stated that, perhaps you are, when you were serving on the board, disgruntled because of the investigation, or disgruntled because even in the investigation it talked about you recording an executive session and releasing that information to the media. Can you tell us a little bit about that situation and why it ended up in the report?
Yeah, I'm glad to talk about it. It's absolutely true. I recorded the event. I released the recording to friends who then released it to the media, and I believe that's what it actually says in the report, not that I released it directly to the media, but it ended up in the media. And the word for me is not disgruntled. I became very frustrated. I got on the school board in Richland School District too because I love my community, because I think education, my degree is in education and sports medicine. I was a former teacher. I taught in the classroom. I have lots of family members that have been in education. My aunt was on the Richland One School Board years ago. I truly believe in public education and what it should do. And it got to a point on our board, and the Inspector General report talks about this, that we never had agenda items that were around students. The constant requests that I got as board chair were around, I want to put the face mask policy on the agenda because I'm unhappy with the face mask that a certain board member wears. We need to talk about, I want unlimited travel funds. We need to talk about.
There were requests for unlimited travel funds.
That's right. That the board should be able to travel to wherever the board wants to go. We talked about the overage of board members, traveling to conferences, and I want to talk about that because some board members frame that as we exceeded the budget line item for board travel, when in fact, because of a lack of controls, board members, myself included, had attended conferences. In the board policy, it says that we would split our board budget up between board members equally, but there's no. That's an arbitrary thing that we did just to set a limit so that we all didn't, like one board member didn't travel to 20 conferences, and then when another one wanted to travel, there were no funds.
Are the conferences mandatory, or
some are? Yeah, some are mandatory through School Boards Association so that you receive training. Others were, optional. But we, and I agree that we need the board members should be educated. We should be up to date on current issues in education, current issues in the political environment that we deal with, changing laws, those sorts of things that we learn when we go to these conferences. But that issue just it spun out of control to the point where you know I was spending so many hours, and the emails and the phone calls and the language between board members became so vitriolic, accusing staff members of not doing their job, abusing staff members, in my opinion. Just this constant, never-ending stream of dysfunction and chaos. And me as a board member trying to handle that. So it's not disgruntled, it was frustrated to the point where we couldn't do the real work of the district. And quite frankly, many times in executive session, we had gotten to situations where we had to shut down executive sessions because there were a couple board members that refused to come in order. They were shouting, yelling, cursing, making accusations, to where we couldn't get the information that we were there to receive in order for us to do our job. And that the reason I recorded was because that had happened so many times, and I became so frustrated with the fact that we couldn't do the real business of the district, that I made a decision, and it's the only time I've done it ever, to hit the record button in executive session. And I did it for the period of time that the tirade occurred. But I think if you listen to the tape and understand that outside of maybe the actual threat part, which was something new, that I didn't expect that to happen, but it did. When you listen to that tirade, you know, I just have to say, my gut was right to hit the button, that I knew it was coming, I understood what the signs looked like, and it did. It's in the report. I'm not trying to hide behind the fact that I broke board policy in that instance. But I felt that, the public needed to know how their public officials were acting and conducting the business that we were elected to conduct for something that I felt is important. Like I said, public education. We're struggling to find teachers. We're struggling to find bus drivers. We're struggling in so many areas. Again, undermining public education. We're in the news every day. You pull up a news article that's on one of our local stations, and you find out it's something that happened in Ohio. And you're like, why does it look like the headline look like it's one of our teachers here that did something?
Do you feel like, and this is actually in the report, is that the tape is one of the reasons why it created or helped to create such a dysfunctional board of trustees, in that some members, namely Dr. Scott, Mr. McFadden, others, wouldn't come into executive sessions. It says that, and thereafter, Mrs. McFadden and Dr. Scott attended executive sessions telephonically from a nearby room, and the erosion of trust exacerbated the inefficiency and ineffectiveness of the board. Do you feel that the board was already inefficient, ineffective, and dysfunctional?
We were already inefficient and dysfunctional. Again, and I don't want to, overstate or over defend my position for breaking board policy or the confidentiality.
It is what it
is.
is.
Particular moment, it is what it is. Again, you mentioned I was willing to take the risk to mar potentially my reputation, which we all highly value our reputations. The reason that I did it, and the reason I thought that the public needed to see, is because we were already that dysfunctional. We were already that dysfunctional. We were already not accomplishing, in my opinion, the business of the district. And again, I want to be clear here. This is not about whether 3 or 4 of us disagreed on issues. It was how we conducted ourselves around those disagreements, right? Because it's we should all absolutely never be on the same page, or rarely be on the same page for something, right? Again, the democratic process is around different ideas and coming together and compromise. But we were already at a point where compromise most times was almost impossible. What we need to be focused on right now, and what the Dr. Davis's quote unquote resignation from the district, I want it to be an alarm bell to the community about the fact that public education is under attack, that we need to pay attention and not just listen to what's on our social media feeds or what somebody tells them, but they need to be actively engaged in the meetings, actively talking to their board members to understand the issues and concerns and where they stand. And not just Richland Two, but across this country. This is a countrywide, there's a playbook, right, that these folks are using. This is not just a organized thing in Richland Two. This is a country nationwide issue. But the fact is, some of our elected officials are using executive session to hide bad behavior. And a behavior that inhibits the mission of whatever board they serve on. They are bullies, they cuss at people, they don't come prepared, and in my case, I had enough and felt that some of that needed to come out, but I need people to understand that there are some individuals that are using executive session to do what I think is inappropriate behavior and act in inappropriate ways because they know the public can't get access.
Moving on, but how does this ultimately impact students?
Right.
Let's talk about that, because today's episode, I know we had to get through all of the adult stuff, seeing as how none of this really has anything to do with the children. This is about power, but really, because you come from a family of educators.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. How does all of this trickle down to the students, and does this impact their ability to learn and perform?
Oh, absolutely, it impacts it. I mean, we talked about teacher shortages, right? I mean, and when you're in an area like the Midlands, where teachers have multiple school districts, they can choose the school district where they want to teach. They don't have to choose Richland Two. They could choose, many other school districts that are
despite the resources.
Right. Despite Richland Two having numerous resources for folks. Again, bus drivers, pride in community, economic development that brings money to help fund schools, to give children more access and more opportunity. And so the issue is when, the old proverbs, when I think it's when elephants fight, the ground underneath or whatever is what really suffers. It drives away quality teachers. It takes away a pride in the community that students have, the pride they have in their community, their school district. It takes, teachers, if they're worried now about who the superintendent is, do they stay with us? Do they leave if their future's uncertain? The quality of administrators that get brought in that have a direct impact on families and teachers. And I also think that when parents, that parents see board members doing that, it also, in some cases, gives them more of a feeling that they can be argumentative in a light manner with our administrators, with teachers, with other folks. It undermines their trust in the people that have nothing to do with us, but it undermines the credibility of the staff, who are the ones that work directly with the students.
So from what I hear you say is that essentially all this political stuff is trickling down to the level where it really shouldn't be,
right?
Which are the teachers, administrators, and from what I think I'm hearing is that parents really take on that political sort of rhetoric or position,
absolutely,
and then it's sort of
I mean, let's look at the racial language that was written in the Spring Valley bathrooms recently, right? It empowers bad behavior from some of our students because they're seeing all this anti-CRT and race and indoctrination and all those kinds of things, and the board isn't actively engaged in trying to manage that situation. And so it creates an environment where, it does impact, and it allows for behavior, it creates an environment for behavior that's disruptive to students. Many ways that happens.
How difficult then do you believe that it is for teachers to try to navigate this?
Oh, it's very difficult. So many teachers are frustrated. We talked about sometimes, and I'll put this on some parents. I mean, their civility with staff, with teachers and administrators, in a lot of cases is not good. We know sometimes our nurses and teachers have gotten cussed out and blessed out by parents more frequently than what we saw before. It also just pride in what you do. I mean, if I can't be proud of what I do, and I tell you that I'm a teacher, and I know that in your mind what you're picturing is this board fighting and all this indoctrination of students we're talking about and all these things, why we've seen teachers leave in droves who are having their licenses in some cases suspended for a year, and they don't care. They just want out.
Why would the teachers' licenses be suspended?
So when a teacher signs a contract with the school district, the State Department can, in certain instances, take that teacher's certificate away for a year, suspend it for a year, as a consequence of breaking the contract with the school district.
And when you say breaking the contract, is that for maybe just guarding their personal beliefs?
Oh no, it's leaving the district, leaving employment before the contract.
Okay, so it's job abandonment.
Job abandonment.
Okay,
yes.
Yeah, but you're saying, like, who wants to work in
Right.
such a toxic environment?
Yeah, you can take my teaching certificate.
Yeah.
I'm going and completely leaving the profession and
Wow.
going to do something else.
So we're losing, from what I hear, is we're losing teachers.
Yes.
Because of this highly politicized, maybe even toxic environment where you can't even focus on why you're there.
Well, I mean, that's, one reason, certainly, right? I mean, we brought the pay up for teachers this year. I think Richland 2 is a little over $41,000 for a beginning teacher. But we also look at what it costs to go to college now. Many people are coming out with, $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 in debt. You work at a job making $41,000, your school board is fighting, parents are telling you that you're teaching CRT and indoctrinating their kids. Some of the kids that tell you don't have to listen to you because my mother told you or my dad told you or whatever. Why would I do that for $41,000 a year? I might even be willing to make less, but I can have peace, and I can be at peace. I can not feel threatened when I go to my job. I can feel pride in what I do. And the stress levels. I mean, we've seen numerous folks who were public officials here recently at relatively young ages dying. And the stress is real.
Yeah. Joy is a part of the district's core
That's right.
values.
Yes, yeah.
Outside of this highly politicized climate, this seemingly toxic landscape,
Right.
do you believe that at the district's core, and we're talking about in the schools,
Right.
amongst the children, do you believe that there is joy there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to completely create this bleak environment that, I think maybe we can overstate some of that. I've talked to lots of teachers. The teachers that are with us, so many of them, they love their kids, they love their job, they love their community. They see their kids not just for the children that are in their classroom, but they understand that what they're doing is really giving that child a future, right? That they are creating these, amazing adults that are part of the community, to give them opportunity.
I love that.
And that is, that is what so many of our teachers, administrators, all staff, right? Bus drivers, I can't tell you how many bus drivers love picking up their kids in the morning, worried about them when they don't show up. Our staff that clean the buildings, that love on our kids.
Those are their
love
kids.
What they do, they're their kids.
Those are their kids.
And in so many ways they are, because they're the neighbors down the street. On top of just being the kids in their school, and so they love what they do, and they know that the price of failure is high.
We see that Richland Two students are doing okay.
They're doing okay.
They're actually overperforming in many areas as it relates to the state averages.
Right. Yeah. So when we talk about performance of our students through COVID, every student through COVID took a different performance, right? I mean, when we look at it across the board, students as a whole are down. In particular, students that maybe had the most needs, educational needs, students that were at those pivotal or critical times where they were learning to read or learning the core foundations of math and other fundamentals. But yes, Richland Two outperformed the state in most areas as it pertained to the rebound. Right, once we got back to school and our programs back in place, we have seen that we have rebounded, not a ton better, but definitely better than the state. Yeah, absolutely. The price of failure is high.
Because I love that in reading Michelle Obama's biography, is how Mr. and Mrs. Robinson never referred to her and her brother as, they were raising children.
Right.
They would always say, we're not raising children,
right.
We're raising adults.
We're raising adults.
We're raising
right.
adults.
Yeah.
And to know that, children are our future.
Right.
If we don't get this right, what do you believe the ramifications are?
Well, the ramifications are huge. I mean, our children more than ever in their journey to being adults, right, need direction. So often if you're a parent of a child or you're close to children, you realize that there is so much on the internet. There's so much on television and the radio and all the social media and all the things around our kids. They need our help, and they need us to be there to shape and guide their future more than ever before. It's so important that we get it right, because they are, I know it's overused, but it's true, right? They are doctors, lawyers, folks running the cash registers, the folks that
HVAC,
carpentry.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, and even bigger than that, it's our national security.
Yes.
I mean, we're under attack from so many places in the world, and some of that is, guns and bombs, and some of it is IT, and some of it is just.
It's a different kind of warfare.
Different kind of warfare, yes, and it's also a fight for our minds.
Yes.
Right. When we look at, we know that there's, fake stories out there, and that some of those are generated from other countries. Right. They're trying to pull us apart. They want what's happening, what we're seeing right here in Richland 2 and other school districts, is part of creating the chaos to weaken the country.
What is your advice to the community, and what is your hope that the community can and will do to help support the students of Richland 2?
Right. Again, I think it's about generally supporting public education, right? I mean, not to say that there's no private school students that maybe are in poverty, because there may be, but they can somehow are able to afford a tuition to go there. They have options because they have enough money. And I know many of those parents sacrifice greatly to send their kids. So it's not a knock on that. It's not a knock on homeschool. I think our students need options. Families should have the options available to them.
It's not a one size
fits all. And I absolutely support their their right to do all of that. But our students that are in public education, the students in poverty, many of them, they don't have a choice where they go to school. This is their choice, their only choice.
Got to make this work.
Got to make this work, right? And one of the largest areas that we have spent more focus and time and money since I've been on the board is in the emotional, social emotional well-being of our students, right? We've added social workers, more psychologists, behavioral specialists. We make sure we feed the students, work with plenty of partners outside of the school system to do that. We look at those what we call ACEs, or those issues that our students have around social media, and all the things that we hear that come from that, right? And all the things that they see in their homes or that they don't have access to. And public education is that equalizer. It is the way for them to succeed. So if we're undermining public education, we're undermining those students, because many of us, I've heard you've heard them, we've all heard them, right? The success stories. Dr. Baron Davis was one of those. He grew up in the projects in Richland 1. His name is on the wall right over here in the Richland 1 projects. Grew up very poor, without a lot of access to anything, but public education, the value that his family gave him, and understanding that education was the way for him to succeed. Right? That's what it's about.
Right.
That's what it's about, and that's what, when we're fighting on the board, or we're fighting, Moms for Liberty and their mission to try to drive public dollars to private schools, which we're seeing the legislatures pass.
Absolutely.
In the midst of passing some of those laws now. we are taking away the opportunity for the students that don't have a choice, that don't have any other option. We're taking away their potential ability to be successful.
Wow. What is your hope for the district today and moving forward into the future?
The hope for the district, and I have to remind myself of this too, I need to do a better job with this myself at times, even some things I've done recently. We got to quit making it personal. We got to stop letting this be about whatever our relationships with each other are. The community needs to pay more attention to what their elected officials are doing. And again, it's not just looking at headlines in the newspaper. It's, showing up, being active, understanding what's going on. We need more qualified people to run for office, to be willing to step out there.
Of all ages.
Of all ages, yeah. We need all ages. We need diversity on the board. I mean, we have a growing Latino population. We have no Latino board members. Growing Korean, Asian community. We have no board members that reflect that community. We have lots of opportunity. We need more people to be willing to put their name in the hat, to run for office, that are there for the right reasons, that are there for all the students and truly supporting public education. But at the end of the day, I think we see this just in general in Richland County and across the country. Tempers have flared over politics and political agendas, and where we disagree. We spend too much time on those disagreements and not enough time on the things that are going to move us forward. Right? Get focused on the right issues, focused on the right topics. One of the very first actions that this board took was to let the superintendent go. When you have the IG report, you've got students that are still, even though the district's outperforming the state, but there's still a loss of learning during COVID that's going to be very difficult. We're struggling to find teachers. We're struggling to find people to work, to drive our buses, to work in our schools, and many employers are struggling to find qualified. We have close to 50%, I saw the other day, of able-bodied South Carolinians aren't even looking for employment.
Well, people are done.
They're just done.
Yeah,
right?
they're
tired.
done. Yeah,
they're done. And so we have to find a way to create peace and focus on the positive things that are happening in your school. Not to say you shouldn't address issues or concerns. You do that with the principal, administration. We don't necessarily need to make Facebook and Instagram and social media the first place where we vent when we haven't gone through the proper channels. The use of FOIA,
Freedom of Information
Act.
Yeah.
You can request emails between board members, between administration.
Just not executive session.
Just not executive session or HR matters or individual students, but you can ask for communications between board members, between board members and staff, between staff folks. I mean, all that's public information that you can have access to. So if you're hearing there's an issue around a certain topic or you want to know more about it, Moms for Liberty frequently uses FOIA to get information that they use and leverage in ways that they want. So that's another way to do it. Talk with your board members, not just in the public, but communicate with them, ask them how you can help, what's going on, not just attacking them, right? But ask how you can help, and opportunities. Go speak in public session. Tell the board members what it is you don't like, and also understand, just like anything, you have to do some research, but you can't just be upset today and disappear a week from now or
Right.
2 weeks from now. The Moms for Liberty group and those groups that are working against us consistently
Yeah.
are at meetings. They consistently FOIA. They have blogs where they share information with each other.
They're well coordinated.
They're very coordinated, and they have candidates year or more ahead of time that are ready to run. They don't show up the day of filing and say they're going to run for office. And they know the process for running for office. They know how to be successful. And if we're going to counter that, then we have to be just as organized around protecting our teachers and our schools and our information. We can't just sit on the sideline and think it's somebody else's work to do.
Am I hearing that potentially you might be willing to help lead or coordinate a community effort to?
I would be happy to as long as it's a positive effort. I am very happy to do what I can, because I think that it is important, and you can't just, like I said, sit on the sideline. It has to be organized and focused. And if I can help to protect the future of our children, then I will. Yeah.
Wow. Well, listen, Mr. James Manning, you all, we really appreciate you for coming to Table Talk today. You've laid it out on us, and we appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all that you've done for the students of R2. And we know that you're going to do amazing things because you've got a wealth of information, and it sounds like you've got a real passion for students and learning.
I
So
do,
we
yeah.
wish you all the best.
Thank
but
you.
We certainly appreciate you.
Thank you.
You
And
all.
thank you for all of you. Yeah. Thank
Mr.
you.
James Manning. All right, you all, if you liked this content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And you can always find us at CUBNSC.com. Find us on Facebook or Meta at CUBNSC. Thanks so much for watching, and have a wonderful night.
Sunday Soul. In Columbia, Sunday Soul.